Baruch Hashem, we're talking about everything we talk about at Emunah. King Solomon says, all the rivers go to the sea. Everything leads to Emunah. But tonight especially appreciating life, appreciating every moment of life, not wasting a single minute. Not wasting a single minute. And you can see the greatest people in the world, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, the Holy Arizal. They lived till they were 38. They're 38, but you look at the 15 volumes of Kabbalah and all the Arizal's Talmidim. Look at what Rabbi Nachman did. Look what each one of them did in 38 years. It is mind-boggling. And the reason they accomplished so much is because they didn't waste any time. There was no such thing as inconsequential time. Everything they did had a purpose. And they could say, what am I doing now? What am I doing now? The Chafetz Chaim was once known, the Chafetz Chaim used to do Idboladut, the Chafetz Chaim used to do personal self-assessment, personal prayer, 2 hours a day. And once one of his Talmidim found out that Chafetz Chaim would disappear from the yeshiva every afternoon from 2 to 4 p.m. And they say, where's the Rebbe? And one of the Talmidim in the yeshiva, one of the students in the yeshiva laid an ambush for the Chafetz Chaim and he followed him. Chafetz Chaim was already an old man in his late 80s. He passed from this world to the next world at age 95. Hashem took him right before the Holocaust. He said the Chafetz Chaim deserved to see the Holocaust. So when he was an old man, already in his late 80s, he was going up in the attic of the yeshiva, and that's where he would do his self-assessment for 2 hours, from 2 to 4. That's where he disappeared. So the student found out, this is where the Rebbe is going. This is where he disappears to, up to the attic. And he put his ear to the door to listen what Chafetz Chaim's doing. Chafetz Chaim is yelling at himself. He's Swilmer, he says in Yiddish, Swilmer, where's the 5 minutes? Swilmer, where's the 5 minutes? Chafetz Chaim accounted for every minute in his life, and he was so upset because there were 5 minutes that day that he didn't know what he did with. He didn't remember what he did with. And so he was so upset with himself. He was doing major tshuva. This is the greats of Israel. This is the greats of Israel. Where do they get it from? If we open up our Gemara, Tractate of Avodah Zarah, there are 3 very interesting stories. One story is about the Romans, the decrees, the evil decrees that the Romans made in the Jews' time, a great persecution. We're talking about the 50 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. And this was a time during the death of the 10 martyrs. We read them on Tisha B'Av, and we read about them on Yom Kippur as if it happened one after the other. But it was actually over the course of 60 years. They said no Shabbat. Jewish people, you want to be a Jew? Okay, no Shabbat, no Brit Milah, and no mikveh. So there was a Roman pro-Jewish senator, and his name was Ketia Bar Shalom. So Ketia Bar Shalom, he had great respect for Rabbi Akiva and his students. So Ketia Bar Shalom, there's once at the Senate, the Caesar was there, and he says, Your Majesty, these are ridiculous decrees. He says, why? He says, you say that the Jews shouldn't keep Shabbat? They couldn't keep Shabbat. Shabbat, they work, it gives a chance to Romans to make more money because the Jews are very clever in business and they stop doing business for a day. All right, let them work all week long and take money away from the Romans. She says, that's right, decree. Okay, and he says, something, Your Majesty? Not letting them do Brit? That's ridiculous. Do you want a strong enemy? We're Romans, we're strong because we don't damage ourselves at 8 days old. Let them weaken themselves. The Brit Milad weakens himself. Take a baby and do him surgery at 8 days old and he bleeds. It weakens him. So, Majesty, why should we strengthen our enemies and not weaken them? This is good. Let's continue weakening them. She says, something? You're right. So you cancel that decree. And then he said, Your Majesty, with us, the Romans, everything goes, and it's all month long. With the Jews, they said 2 weeks a month, nothing, and then they go to the mikveh, and then, okay, 2 weeks. Your Majesty, if you give them all 4 weeks, they're going to have much more kids. They have much more kids. You want more Jews around? He says, no, he canceled that. So then, the Satan, sometimes we get Eliyahu Navi. The Satan whispered in Your Majesty, this is all a trick. He's really in favor of the Jews. So Caesar said, something, you may be right, Senator Katia Bar Sholem, but you're going to death because you criticized my decrees. You criticizing the king, criticizing the Caesar, that's death penalty. So as they took him out to die, Katia Bar Sholem, he took out a knife on the spot. He circumcised himself, became a Jew on the spot. They killed him right away, and he said, all my wealth to Rabbi Akiva and his students. A voice came out of Shemaim and said, Katia Bar Sholem is welcome to the world to come. At that point, Rebbe cried, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda cried, he said, there's some people work all their lives to get in the world to come. Some people in one moment earn the world to come. I'm going to explain to you what Rebbe meant in a moment. But let's get another story. Another story, same tractate, Avodah Zorah. Now, Rabbi Chanina ben Tardion, he was Bruria's father. He was Rabbi Meir's father-in-law. Rabbi Meir Balanes his father-in-law. And he was one of the 10 martyrs. He and Rabbi Akiva, one of the 10 martyrs. So they caught him teaching Torah. Teaching Torah was also against the law. So what they did, the sadistic Romans, they wrapped him up in a Torah scroll and burned him together in the Torah. And this is the famous Gemara where they saw the letters floating back up to Shemaim. The letters didn't burn. They left the parchment floating back up to Shemaim, and you could see this. But what they did, the sadistic Romans, they took cotton, a big wad of cotton, put it in water, then put it on his heart, so that around his heart there would be less fire. His whole body would burn, but his heart would burn slower, and this was a more slow, excruciating death. There was a Roman executor, was in charge of burning him, but he saw what was happening. And he said to Rabbi Chanina ben Tardion, he says, if I remove that cotton from your heart, will you take me to the next world? And he said, yes. So the Roman soldier, executor, all his life he's been killing Jews, executing people, hanging people, burning people, cutting off their heads. At one moment he takes the sponge, the water-soaked cotton off Rabbi Chanina's heart, and he makes the fire stronger, and he himself jumps in the fire and burns together with Rabbi Chanina ben Tardion. And a voice came from Shemaim and said, the Roman sergeant is invited to the world to come. Here's a guy, he didn't even make a bris to himself, like Katia Bar Sholem did, but yet he made the death less excruciating for Rabbi Chanina ben Tardion. It's one of our greatest tzaddikim that ever lived, greatest Talmudim Chachomim never lived. And he invited the world to come. The guy earned his world to come in one moment. And that's it. Some people work all their, this Rebbe again cried. Some people work all their lives for the world to come, and some people earn it in one. No, we're not finished. Now comes the juicy story. This would be X-rated were it not in the Gemara. I could not tell the story, but the Gemara says it. Open up the Gemara. If somebody wants to learn the Gemara in my class, I get to teach the Gemara. Maybe I'll tone it down. And this is a Gemara that young people under the age of 18, please leave the room. Okay. There was a playboy. And I'm Yisrael. Pardon? No, I'm not going to be graphic. I'm not going to be graphic. This has gone through 18 filters. Okay. But the Gemara is not filtered. This is going through 18 filters for the group. There was a boy who was not so, he was going to two sides of the fence. He was from a very good home, but yet he would do things on the other side of town. Well, he once heard he loved women. He loved women. He didn't get married. He just loved women. And he heard that there was this beautiful woman in the Greek islands. So he got a bag full of gold coins, and he went to this Greek island. And he went to this woman, and she saw he was a rabbi. Rabbi, saw that he was a rabbi. The guy was dressed like a religious Jew, like a frum Jew, and just comes to her with all these coins. So wait a second, this is a little bit of a contradiction in terms. The way you look, and you come to me. And he says, yeah, we have, that's it. Our Gemara says we do things out of town. I don't do things in my hometown. He certainly doesn't do this in what he does in the Greek islands. He doesn't do in Yerushalayim or Bnei Brak. And in the middle of what they're doing, she says to him, you know something? Here, this woman of the night, this Greek woman of the night on a Greek island, she says to Reb Lezer ben Dordia, so Reb Lezer, because the Gemara calls him that, she says to him, you know, sir, you can never do tshuva. Your tshuva will never be accepted, even if you try. He's listening. Wait a second, wow. This goes right in his heart like a spear. If he would have 55 mashgichim from 55 different yeshivas that would chastise him, this toichacha, this chastisement didn't work. Like this one woman who works in the most ancient profession, she had a chastisement. So he right away got up and left, and he went out in the field, and he said, son, you got to help me. The son says, before I help you, I got to help myself. And he gave a pasuk from Yeshayahu that says, if Yisrael doesn't make tshuva, then the sun and the moon, they're going to go. And then he says, stars, you got to help me. He asked the stars. He asked all of creation to help him. And everybody gave him a pasuk that they can't help him. So he put his head between his knees, and he cried, and he cried, and he cried, and he made tshuva. Like 10 Yom Kippurs rolled into one. He made tshuva. He made such tshuva that his neshama left him. Neshama left him. A voice came out of Shemayim, third time, and said, Rabbi Eliezer ben Dordia is invited to the world to come. Wow. What this guy did in his lifetime, forget about it. You don't even want to read about it. We wouldn't, if we were not in the Gemara, we couldn't even talk about it. But yet in 1 second, he made tshuva from the bottom of his heart, tshuva so deep that his neshama left him. He's invited to the world to come. A third time, Rebbe cried, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi cried. He said, there are people that earn their olam haba, they earn the world to come in one moment. Other people have to work their whole lives. So it sounds like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, that he had to work so hard. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi made one little, it wasn't even an Avera, but on his level was Avera. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was walking, and they were taking a calf to slaughter. Taking a calf to slaughter. And the calf ran away from the person that was accompanying to the slaughterhouse, taking the slaughterhouse, and the calf hit under Rebbe's record. Right under the, okay. And the calf started crying as if he knew where he was going. Rebbe, protect me. He could look down. Rebbe could understand the language of the animals. This is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He was the president of Israel. He's a great-grandson of King David. King David understood the language of the animals. So Rebbe said to the calf, go back to him. This is what you were born. This is what you're born. Ooh. The president of Israel should lack compassion? It was right then and there decreed that Rebbe would have 13 years of excruciating toothaches. Have you ever had a toothache? It's not a toothache so bad, feels like an arrow was shooting your tooth into your brain. An emergency dentist, and what you do, whew, crazy. 13 years, toothaches, you can't imagine. Finally, how did it end? It ended also in one moment. Rebbe's maid found some mice in the presidential palace where Rebbe lived. She found some mice, and she was going to take them and she was going to drown them. Rebbe said no. He brought a pasuk from Tehillim, Kuf Mem Hey. Hashem is compassionate, just like Hashem is compassionate. We have to be compassionate on all of creation. And then his toothache left him. Said Rebbe acted like Hashem, and he's compassionate. This was a tikkun for 13 years of tribulations. So Rebbe himself, in one moment, he earned tikkun. He would try to do tshuva and 13 years self-assessment, and he didn't actually get it. But in one moment, he did tshuva. What do we see here? We see here the power of one moment. Power of one moment. One moment is so profoundly powerful. And believe me, cherished sisters and brothers, if you've ever been in a situation where you look at your watch and you got 60 seconds to live, in a crossfire, in a war, and there's shelling, and there's bombing with Katyusha rockets. This happened to me in downtown Beirut in 1982. And we're a squad of 12 guys, and not everybody came home. And with what was happening, the shell's getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer. In fact, the next one's going to be in our head. And the next one probably fell in about 30 seconds. 30-second life expectancy. Next one's on our head, nowhere to go. Can't go. This direction is the Syrian, this is 1982, First Lebanon War. The PLO in this direction, the Syrians in this direction, Katyusha battery in this direction, can't go behind us, right in the middle, downtown Beirut, boxed in. What do? You got 30 seconds to live. What do you do when you got 30 seconds to live? Call out to Hashem. What do you do if you don't know Hashem? You know, Hashem doesn't. This happened to me. One thing, Hashem. I come from a conservative Jewish home. I lived in the United States till I was 21 years old. Went to the University of Maryland, studied agriculture. We were a Zionistic house, not a religious house. My dream was to go to Eretz Yisrael and to be a soldier and make a border farm. That's exactly what he did, both dreams. But now the dream's over. And with 30 seconds left to live, make a really fast accounting, a really fast cheshbon nefesh. You see a movie of your whole life as it goes in front of you. What you did your whole life. Oh, we did neat stuff. We raced cars. Even though we're good students, we were a good student at university. And we had a lot of fun. And we drank beer. And we dated girls. And we did a lot of fun. What non-religious Jewish American boys do. No, nothing chas v'sholem, drugs. This is what they call in America good, clean fun. Gulnish bitnish. Oh, but then you came and you settled the land of Israel and you built a border farm. But raised peaches and turkeys. You know, they ask an Israeli farmer, one of the dumbest birds in the world is a turkey. They said, you've been working for turkeys for 40 years and it hasn't affected your brain? And he says, la 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 la. So what do? Tell Hashem, okay, I raised turkeys in Eretz Yisrael. I raised peaches in Eretz Yisrael. I went to war, went to borders. Had such sadness, and on secular scales. Had great friends and high status. Everything a secular kid could dream of. Come to Eretz Yisrael, and was in a very good unit, one of the best units in the Israeli army, and my own farm at Eretz Yisrael. Nothing. I had this deep sadness that my life was wasted. And I could envision, in the last couple of seconds, you see this is 30 seconds, but it's like a whole movie, a whole life. Everything goes in front of you. And at that time, my parents were out in Silver Spring, Maryland. I had a brother in Vietnam, and I was in Lebanon, and my parents had lost my older sister, their first daughter. It's not enough that mom was a Holocaust survivor, and dad was a World War II pilot, barely made out alive. And now I'm imagining that the military attaché in Washington is going to come to them and tell them that they're number two. They lost their number one daughter. Now their number two son is dead in a gutter in Beirut. And that brought me a deep sadness. But the more sadness that brought me when I think about Mom and Bob, I was thinking about Avinu Shebshamayim, my Father in heaven. What have I done for my Abba Shamayim for 32 years? That time I was 32 years old, 41 years ago. That brought me a deep sadness. And it hit me, things I never thought about. For 32 years, I never thought about why my heart beats and who makes it beat. Never thought about my brain impulses and who makes a brain impulse. Never thought about every breath I took. Took it all for granted, all for granted, all for granted. You take it for granted that you can run 10 miles. You take it for granted you can work out. You can take for granted all these gifts. And now all of a sudden, every single heartbeat is a gift. Every single breath is a gift. And the breaths were difficult because it was Beirut in the summer, the end of the summer, it's like 95 degrees Fahrenheit and about 92% humidity. And such humidity, maybe you have it here in 5 towns in the summer, in a really hot summer day when it gets really the worst humidity. You ever been in Purim and Shul when the little kids shoot caps and you feel you can't breathe? Because it's little tiny caps have a tiny bit of gunpowder. You notice when big amounts of gunpowder explode, you can't breathe. The air is black with smoke. And if we don't get hit by a shell, another incoming shell or a bullet, then it's going to choke. It was difficult to breathe. Shem heard my prayers. And I had this feeling, you're going to get out of there. But you can learn to devote your time, write the Gemara. And not every moment and every moment and every moment. So what did Rebbe mean when he said about the 3 different instances that there are people that buy their olam haba in one moment, as if he was jealous? No, he's not jealous. He said, look at these powerful guys. If they could earn their olam haba in one moment, what would they do if they did this? They served Hashem all their lives. All their lives. Do you know, every time we wake up, every time we say one word of thank you to Hashem, that's olam haba. Every time we do a bit of chesed for another Jew, that's olam haba. Every time the Yetzer Hara takes a pound of Lashon Hara and puts it on a Jew's tongue and just dying to say this Lashon Hara, he says, no. Chafetz Chaim says it's 14 positive mitzvahs and 17 negative mitzvahs. We just cannot do this. We cannot do this. You know what happens? You just earn your olam haba. Even more so, you go to your olam haba, and all of a sudden you got this honor guard of all these 100,000 angels. 100,000 angels that come and they say, oh, Moti's here, Avramel is here, Yudi's here, Saul is here, Rivka is here, and all these the honor guards say, who am I? I'm just a regular Jew from 5 towns. What do I do? What's the big deal? I said, no. Do you remember that one time that you had such temptation? The Yetzer, he brought out an army to force you to say Lashon Hara. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I am not going to say something bad about another Jew. Do you know what happened at that exact moment? And this is a true story. If you know any Mekubal, a real Mekubal, you can ask him, he'll tell you. Because Kol Yisrael Arevim, all of Israel are guarantors for one another. There's a terrorist the day before yesterday on the road to Tel Aviv. Today were 3 terrorist hits in Eretz Yisrael. And we all had a rough Shabbat because of Friday we saw pictures of 2 little boys, 6 and 8, the Pili brothers. Couldn't stand it. Look at that. It's not. You look at these children, their own grandchildren. What's the difference if I biologically gave birth to him or somebody else did? We're all brothers and sisters. We're all sons and daughters of Hashem. What's the difference? Oh, no, my kids are okay. They're safely in bed. And a mother is crying because she's lost 2 children and her husband's fighting for her life. Shem Yishmor. But yet there's the flip side. The day before yesterday, a terrorist on his way from Jenin, nasty place, Jenin, and he built a car with 100 kilograms, 220 pounds of explosives, and that's not all. Together with the 100 kilograms of explosives, there were 200 kilograms of males. Do you know what happens in a car? A car bomb. 100 kilos of explosives with 220 pounds of nails. Shem Yishmor. Shem Yishmor V'Yatzil. On the way to Dizengoff Square in downtown Tel Aviv. Oh, wow. Just to think of what could happen. But there is a young woman in 5 towns and a young man in 5 towns that could have slaughtered somebody with Lashon Hara and said, no, I'm not going to do it. They themselves suffered insult, but no, they're not going to give it back. They're not going to give it back. At that moment, the car blew up in the terrorist's face, or the border police caught him, or it did not happen. And nobody knows what's going on. But meanwhile, There was a guy in 5 towns. This is, well, what's it? What's going to happen if I watch a Super Bowl? What's he going to give me if I watch a Super Bowl? 50% of the people are going to be depressed, clinically depressed after the Super Bowl anyway, because the team's going to lose. All right? I don't even know who won the game. I don't know who was in the Super Bowl. But what happens is during the time of the Super Bowl that your brother, your husband, your son opened up a Gemara and learned Daf Yomi at the time of the Super Bowl. Terrorist car blows up in his face. That's it. You're a hero. You're a hero. All these, wherever I went, there are a lot of... I don't want to say which synagogue and what synagogue. I think there weren't synagogue party rooms with Super Bowl parties. Want to have a Daf Yomi party. The power of a mitzvah in one moment can get your whole world to come. And this is Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and this is the Arizal. They did this all their lives. They did this all their lives. So stop and think. What goes on now with the iPhones and the chat rooms and Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and LinkedIn and FakedIn and whatever all can. When people give their lives to get a like. A like. So you go to the grocery store, you go to the supermarket, you go to Pomegranate, you want to buy Shabbos food, and you go to the checkout counter, you've got all this great Shabbos food, and they say, yes, ma'am, what do you pay, cash or credit card? I said, no, I've got 100 likes. Lady, this is where, cash or credit card? Sir, cash or credit card? No, but I got 200 likes. 200 likes! You know what it is to have 200 likes on one post? Gulnish nicht. Doesn't help you. Doesn't help you. But yet people, they're living all their lives for another like and for another like and for another like. Wait a second. What are you doing on Facebook? What are you doing in front of a screen? Buy us an Eretz Yisrael. We had kids there, but I know I live in a different society. Our kids do not have screens. Why do they have screens? Let's see, if you have a heavyweight boxing championship, but it's not going to be 2 people hitting each other, going to put a Gemara Bavli in the ring with a screen. Whether it's an iPhone, iPod, tablet. I'm sorry, my beloved Gemara Bavli, never going to win. There's no such thing as a Gemara that beats a screen. But it's something different. One word, says the Chafetz Chaim, one word that a Jew says out of that Gemara Bavli, that's world to come. Because the Chafetz Chaim says, what for a man is so terrible for when we know what's terrible about Lashon Hara. We'll go into more and more, but it's not a lesson about Lashon Hara. But about for the guys, what's so terrible for them about Lashon Hara? Because for every word they're using, the Zohar, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, when we come into the world, we have a quota of words that we speak. When that quota is over, bye-bye, check out, that's it. It gadal v'it gadash, game's over. So people that waste their quota on narishkeit, on nonsense, and heaven forbid, on even not non-consequential speech, but speech that's negative, that's terrible. So Chafetz Chaim says that the reason a man gets the book thrown at him for Lashon Hara is you said 100 words of Lashon Hara in 1 minute. You could have learned 100 words of Torah, and each one is world to come. Each one. And we don't realize what we're doing. We don't realize what we're doing. What are we doing on the social media? Get it out of here. Okay, if someone wants to keep, a guy needs a phone, needs a tablet for school or for business or for messages, okay. But you be the influencer. Don't be influenced by that. What are you reading what somebody writes about, what this one said about someone else? Heaven forbid. Heaven forbid. All Lashon Hara. The Mishnah tells us, Bol Cheshbon, the Mishnah says we have to take accounting of everything we do. When we account our time, nothing is more valuable than our time. And you see people that say, I don't have time. Stop and think. And this is the real tshuva. This is the greatest tshuva you could do. To think about the tshuva, did this, or did that, and go roll in the sand, and do all kinds of torture yourself. Hashem doesn't need torture, not in this generation. We just take stock in ourselves and look at the time we waste. See people walking in the street and they're talking, they're talking. Sometimes they got the Bluetooth. I've got a present from my 19 years in combat is that today I got hearing aids. So people are self-conscious about wearing hearing aids. I said, wait, but I had a friend of mine from my old unit. He said, Laser, you got yours? Yeah, I said, I already had mine a year now. He says, I need mine now. He says, I feel so like an old man wearing these silly hearing aids. I said, what do you feel like an old man? Look at your hearing aids, you can't even see them. Mine you can't even see unless you look up close. But these guys are walking around with these howitzers in their ears, these big Bluetooths, and they're sticking out like that. Not only that, they're walking the street, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. I think these guys are in the funny farm. They're talking and conversing, and ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. But come on, what are you doing? It would be much better. You know why we teach kids Mishnayos by heart? So they can walk in the street and they can not Mishnayos by heart. Walking the street and talking on the phone, there's something that an observant Jew doesn't do. We don't walk and eat a sandwich while walking in the street. You see people do this. No. We sit down. The Gemara says when there's no Beit HaMikdash, that a person's table atones for him. Shulchano shladam mechapel badam. That's why we sit down at a table and dress properly. This and that. Don't come to the table in a t-shirt. Come to the table and sit properly. Because it's a mizbeach. When there's a moed, your table is an altar. And he said, do things. Oh, people sit at the table, and they talk. And lack of shalom bayit. See, what's together time? He comes to the phone. He comes to the table with his phone. She comes to the table with her phone. Get the phones out of there. Quality time. That's to make your family time, olam haba. Stop and think about the time with your wife, the time with your husband. No phones allowed. In shul, no phones allowed. After COVID, in our shul, I down by my Rebbe, the Melitzer Rebbe, no phones allowed in shul. But after COVID, the people, crazy COVID, our shul barely had COVID. And most everybody had COVID, but it was very light, very light. Nobody got really sick with COVID. Because understood, why did they put masks on us? Because our speech wasn't proper. And why social distancing? Social distancing is what they do to the Metzora. When you take the leper and you put him aside from everybody because of all this Lashon Hara. And why were we kicked out of shul and the shuls were closed? Nobody thinks, nobody smells the coffee. Why does Shem do all this? COVID was all about wasting time, wasting our speech, not respecting the synagogue. That's it. So we had, when the police said you got to close down, we opened up the shul, clandestine. In Israel, a little chutzpah. Okay, we listened to the Eibishter's law. And the Rebbe says, open the shul, we open up the shul. I don't care what the police say. Okay, we locked it on the outside and closed the curtains and daven to Shem and a minyan. That's what we did during COVID. But absolutely no talking in shul. No talking. You come into our shul, you do not hear a word outside of tefillah. People pray fervently. If somebody wants to talk, go outside. Somebody wants to make a phone call, go outside. Not in the shul. Not in the sanctity of shul. So together with our speech and our time, knowing that every single word is olam haba, every single minute is olam haba, why sell it for cheap? Why sell it for cheap? Where every single person, one thing, the Mashgiach of Manchester, the Mashgiach of Manchester promises, he's got a big Yeshua, that for anyone that needs any salvation at all, two halachas of Lashon Hara a day, do his or her best not to say slander about another Jew, and that's it. So what does all this have to do? We talked about security, all the terrorists in Israel, and all the terror hits, and all the strife, and what's going on in Eretz Yisrael now, Hashem Yishmol. It's Mashiach times, where it's close to civil war. Everybody's everybody else's neck. What's all this have to do with that? It's all because of slander, Lashon Hara. Now, why is there Lashon Hara? That people waste so much time. Most of the time is wasted. There's Lashon Hara. There's never, ever since Adam, Eve, and the snake, the Yetzer Hara, has never been stronger in history, because now the snake has social media. It used to be what it used to be in the old days with no telephones. Before Alexander Graham Bell. How hard do you have to work to say Lashon Hara to 100 people? You really got to work hard. You got to go from one to another, or even if you're in Britain, you have to get people. They used to have the soapbox orators. Okay, so you stand on a soapbox and wait till there's 100 people in the park, and you say something bad about someone. That's unreasonable. Some constable will take you down anyway. You won't be able to do it. Now, one push button, you don't know how many thousand people you reach. And this one passes on someone else. Did you hear about this one? Did you hear about this one? Did you hear about this one? So the tshuva for man to fellow man is you have to say, I'm sorry to Hashem for what you did, and ask forgiveness for the fellow man. So now the tshuva for Lashon Hara, we have to go to every single person that heard the slander and say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, I made a error, it's not true. Who could do that tshuva nowadays, social media? Nobody could do it. So what's the result? The result is everything that's going on now. And there's one hardcore law that our sages tell us. Listen to this. No terrorist, no anti-Semite, no Nazi, no Hamasnik, no Hezbollah can touch the hair of a Jewish head until one Jew harms another Jew. Once one Jew harms another Jew, then up in Shemayim, okay, green light, let the wolves out of the den. But they can't do it until one Jew harms another Jew. Wow. We have a mitzvah in our Torah, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your neighbors yourself. If you ask a professor in Faculty of Sociology, Social Science, or Faculty of Psychology or Anthropology, it says humanly impossible. Humanly impossible for one person to love another person like he loves himself, because it's survival of the fittest. Excuse me, professor, where do you learn survival of the fittest? Oh, I learned it from Charles Darwin. Oh, what does Charles Darwin say about human yichus? Oh, he says his great-grandfather was an orangutan, and the great-grandfather was a chimpanzee, and the great-great-grandfather was a gorilla. Oh, okay. This is the same thing. Just as you're a nincompoop on yichus, you're a nincompoop on this also. When it's bodies, yeah. When it's an animal, one animal protects itself and worries about his own food, doesn't worry about another animal. But we're not bodies, we're neshamas. When the Torah says, Bari matem l'Hashem Elokechem, the Torah is talking about the side of the neshama, where the neshama is the real you, not the body. So if you look at another person, this guy's from, this guy's not, this girl's Ashkenazi, this girl's Sephardi, this one even within the Hasidim, this one is this one is that, even within one Hasidus, and that they're at each other's throat. The Jews have, it's not enough we have all these enemies, we're all enemies within ourselves, forget all that. You look at another person's neshama. If you believe that Hashem created, well, we're getting voices from Shemayim. Wow. If you believe that Hashem did everything, and Hashem did everything for the best, and Hashem does everything, loves Father, basics of Emunah, then you look at another person, you look at another Jew, and you know what it means that Hashem put you on earth? If I would ask someone to come up to me, okay, take off my jacket, we're going to transform now from a Torah lesson to an exercise lesson, okay? I'm going to play signs. I'm going to raise my hand, lower my hand. I need someone to help me demonstrate. I'm not going to do that. It's embarrassing. I'm going to raise my hand, lower hand, raise my foot, lower my foot in front of the whole audience. But if under the table, I slip you a couple $100 and you need money for Shabbos food, okay, this is already incentive. So you know you wouldn't do something without an incentive, without a reason. Why do we think we're smarter than Hashem? That Hashem does something without a reason. You know what it means when Hashem put you on earth? And you don't value yourself. You look in the mirror and you say, you're not good enough. If I would ask people what's the worst Yetzer Hara in the world, it's not what you think. That's number 2. The worst Yetzer Hara in the world is when you look in the mirror and you say you're not good enough. Guy says, oh, my friend, he made this startup company and sold it for $140 million. And my other friend is a Rosh Yeshiva, and I'm Schnooky with the shoe store. And a woman looks in the mirror, she says, oh, my girlfriend or husband is so successful and she's so gorgeous, and come on. You think you're imperfect? You know what you say when you think you're imperfect? Heaven forbid, you're saying Hashem is imperfect, because Hashem created you. Hashem does it, there's no imperfection against Hashem. Everything is perfect what Hashem does. She says, how can I be perfect? You are perfect to do your job on earth. And if Hashem created you, Hashem doesn't do anything for nothing. It means that the world cannot exist without you on earth. You don't think about it. People don't think about it. Look at it. I'm not important. I'm not a Rosh Hashiva. I'm not the Rebbe Tzedek Gadol Ador. I'm not this. You can't. Take stock in yourself. Maybe that child you're raising is going to be the Rebbe Tzedek Gadol Ador, or that son you're raising is. You don't look at yourself. Look at what you're doing. Look at whatever you're doing. That you buy your world in one moment. And there are some people that want one moment after another moment after another moment. You know, parents that have well-adjusted children. Why well-adjusted children? Because some parents, they buy their kids. Here, take your Game Boy and take your this boy and take your that. Just I'm not going to have personal time. You know what it is when a mommy and daddy, they sit on little Avrami's, a little Suri's bed, and they say, Amalach HaGoel, and they say, Kriya Shema, you're buying your world. This is tachlis. You're teaching the next generation of Emunah, and you can't teach the next generation of Emunah. If you live it, you can give it, and if you don't live it, you can't give it. That's the way it works. That's the way it works. So here we are. We can, every moment after moment after moment, they come up to minutes, they come up to years, where the sachar, the rewards are mind-boggling. Why sell ourselves for cheap? Worse than that, why sell ourselves for nothing? Worse than that, why sell ourselves for negative? To give up a world, a beautiful world of Hashem, His Torah, His mitzvahs, emunah. Dude, emunah is crazy. Every single moment, I believe in Hashem, I believe in Hashem. Yeah, Hashem is with me, I believe in Hashem. Every single moment that a person believes in Hashem is the mitzvah of emunah, and it's greater than any mitzvah of the Torah. Last week's parsha. Hashem said two mitzvahs by Himself. He said, Anochi Hashem Lokecha. The first of 10 commandments, they said, Lo Yelach Elohim Achim. The first two mitzvahs. And then Am Yisrael, oh, Moshe, stop! Our neshamas are leaving us. And they were leaving them. Each one had a malach that shtupped the neshama back in the body. They couldn't hear Hashem's voice and stay alive. They couldn't. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to be an emissary for the next 611 mitzvahs. So what happens if we do a mitzvah, we give charity, then we get rewarded with the Hashem says, this is what Reb Lezer ben Yaakov says in Pirkei Avos. We can now understand the Mishnah in the 4th chapter Pirkei Avos, that he who does a mitzvah creates a positive malach, and he who does a transgression creates a negative malach. Okay? Why? A malach, not an angel, malach means emissary. The person says a malach, he says an emissary. They got a double meaning. In the case of a malach, it means both, because an angel is Hashem's emissary. So a person does a mitzvah as an emissary. When a person loves another Jew, it's not just loves another Jew. Does a favor for another Jew, not just a favor for another Jew. But he does that because of his emunah in Hashem, and he believes that each person has a neshama, what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai tells us in the Zohar in Parshas Bereishis, Chelek Eloch Me'ma'al. It's not only you get the malach, the emissary, you get Hashem. Because any mitzvah that has to do with emunah, since Hashem said the mitzvah of emunah, Hashem gives the word personally. Wow. You know what that means? If somebody needs a really big Yeshua, somebody needs a soulmate, and the doctors say, no hope. I said right before I came here, where I'm staying in Flatbush tonight, it brought me a person with, a terminal, big-time terminal, and doctors said, no hope. Doctors say no hope, that's the beginning of hope. Because where the brain kicks off, that's where emunah kicks in. And when the doctors, the lawyers, the CPA says no, that IRS is going to hit you for $500,000. and the lawyer says, there's no way I can win the case, you're going to jail. And the doctor says, no, it's terminal. Wrong, 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 wrong. That's where Emunah has to kick in. And anybody, Emunah, Reb Chaim of Volozhin, he says, there's a segula. For any salvation we need, that's 3 words. Ein od milvado. When a person says, Ein od milvado, there's no one Hashem. Hashem says, oh, you're not putting your trust in the lawyer? You're not putting your trust in the doctor? You're not putting your trust in the CPA? You're coming to me, you're putting trust in me? Okay. Sometimes we have difficulties in life. Hashem doesn't fault us for not coping with the difficulties in life. Hashem faults us for saying, why didn't you ask me for help? You know why people don't ask Hashem for help? And why people don't talk to Hashem? Because they don't believe in Hashem. So, what do you mean you don't believe in Hashem? I'm from. Oh, you're from? Okay, Yofi. Try this exercise. Say the word from and smile. Let's see what you do. Try it. Say from and smile. Can't do it. From. Now say Emunah and smile. Emunah. It's a difference. A smile on your face means that you like the way Hashem runs the world. And when a person doesn't smile, it means that he or she doesn't like the way Hashem runs the world. It's not nice, because Hashem is a loving Father, and everything does for the best, whether or not we believe it, whether or not we know it. But that's the truth. That's the spiritual truth. So we know that Hashem is with us, and Hashem is blessing us in every do. Hashem commands those malachim that they should be with us all the time. And if a person would see the protective malachim, Gam kielech gates al movis. Why King David? How could he say, although I walk in the valley of death, and he walked in the valley of death? All his life, enemies from within, enemies without. Nobody had problems like King David did. And how did he keep a smile on his face? Ki atoimadi, because you were with me. I'll tell you something else. People don't know how to read Tehillim. Open up Kuf Lamed Tet. King David makes an amazing admission about himself. Do you know that King David says he should have been bipolar? King David says, Psalm 139. King David says, Imasak shamayim shamata. He says, when I'm flying high, I'm on top of the world, there you are, Hashem. Imatzia Sheol. When I crash land, Sheol, in Gehenna, there's 7 compartments. Sheol is the bottom compartment of Gehenna. King David says, when I'm flying in the heavens, here's Hashem. Imatzia Sheol, Hineka. When I crash on the bottom, here you are, Hashem. Ki atayimadi. You're with me. Hashem is with me. We have Hashem in our lives. We don't suffer the highs and the lows. We're not crazy arrogant when we're successful, and we don't become depressed when we're less successful. No, this comes from Hashem, this comes from Hashem. Thank you, Hashem, thank you, Hashem. What? Thank you, Hashem? Anybody say thank you, Hashem? Every time we say thank you, Hashem, it is an amazing mitzvah, because thanking Hashem, we're Jews. And Jews is Yehudi. Yehudi comes from Lodot. The word Jew means to thank Hashem. So as soon as we thank Hashem, we're fulfilling emunah. We believe in Hashem. We're fulfilling our tachlit. We're taking advantage of every single moment, because when you thank Hashem, you gain your olam haba in one moment. And you know what happens? Hashem takes the whole kehila of Cedarhurst in 5 towns, lifts it up, turns it around, drops it down, and rebuilt Holy Jerusalem with Mashiach and our holy temple, speed in our days. Amen.